I love making things, so this is a tutorial on how to make a very simple bouffant style scrub cap. Making scrub caps for people out there on the front lines in medicine or cleaning or anywhere else is something I can do. Hopefully after watching this tutorial, it's something you feel like you can do too. If you're comfortable sewing, I've listed the times so you can skip ahead if you want to. But here's what you need to do to sew a bouffant cap. First, either purchase the pattern I started with from the Etsy vendor, A Design by Angie. It's a simple download. You look up the puffy pixie style drawstring tie-back scrub hat, and the URL will be in the description. It's just $3.60, and let's face it, altering a useful pattern is a lot simpler than starting from the beginning. But if you're in a hurry or don't have a printer, here are the dimensions and you can figure it out yourself. Also, check the description for links to videos on how to make your own bias tape if you can't get elastic or ribbon. And there will also be a link for making masks eventually and how to batch sew these, just a couple of simple tips. But instructions for sewing a few hats comes first. So here's the hat. And I'm going to show you everything you need and everything you need to do to make this scrub hat. These are the materials you'll need to sew one hat. 100% cotton fabric, about 2/3 of a yard or 24 inches. Thread, bias tape or grosgrain ribbon, 32 inches. Elastic, 2.5 inches per hat. A 1/4 inch elastic is ideal, but 1/2 inch or even 3/4 inch, which is what I had to work with, will work too. And if or when you run out of elastic, 13 inches of bias tape can fill in, and I'll show you how that works. You'll need an iron, a ballpoint pen, ruler, scissors, pins. If you have a cutting mat and a rotary cutter, this will make things go a lot faster. If you don't, scissors and just a good ruler and a smooth surface to work on can fill in. This design has no raw edges when you're finished. That means nothing is there to fray when you wash it. That said, you want to go ahead and wash your fabric before you sew it. Wash it on the highest heat settings you have and dry it on the highest heat settings you have. This will wash out the sizing fabric is typically sold with and will shrink it as much as it is going to shrink. Once you've washed and dried the fabric, iron it high heat with steam to remove any hard folds so it will lie flat for cutting. Nothing super exacting, you just want to get rid of the big creases. Go ahead and refold the fabric the same way it came off the bolt with the selvage ends together. Then lay that almost rectangle piece so the arrows are on the fold and go ahead and cut it out. Then refold the rest of the fabric and cut that half circle piece. The important part is to cut a little extra bit here that I've shown in my pattern, but only on one end. This is to create a nice sleeve for the elastic or your bias tape tie that's really easy to work with on the back of the hat. Then draw the lines for ironing. I've made them red in the pattern I'm showing. So transfer all of those onto the pattern pieces. So there's going to be one ironing line on the round top of the hat piece, and then there's going to be an 1.5 inch line most of the way around the long rectangle piece. On the two short ends of the long rectangle piece, go ahead and draw a line 1.5 inches away from each end. When you lay the long piece all the way out, you'll notice it's sort of a giant trapezoid. The longer side is the top, and the shorter of these two sides is the bottom. And that you want to go ahead and also draw an 1.5 inch line up from the bottom. Once you've done that, go back and mark the 2 attachment points for the ribbon. These are 11.5 inches from the end. When you're all done, you should have an 1.5 inch border around 3 sides of this very long trapezoid. Now it's time to go and do a little ironing on the circle, the top of the cap. Go ahead and fold it over at the line that you marked. the dotted line on the pattern, and then again fold over just a little bit at the top so you can create that pocket and hide the raw edge. Fold it over again and iron it flat really quickly. Once you finish the top of the cap, let's go to the part that goes around the head. Go ahead and fold that short end down to the line you marked and then fold it over on the line you marked. Then iron it flat. You can do this without ironing, but I'm not that good, and doing the ironing makes everything go a lot faster. Do it on the other side as well. Fold the fabric up along that line you drew along the shorter side of this giant trapezoid and iron along so you're sort of creating the pocket at the bottom. Once you've ironed the pocket all the way down, you'll need to fold the top of that pocket over so you'll get rid of that raw edge. You can try folding it in like I tried to do here, but I'm not that good. So go ahead and just open it up, fold down about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 inch, and just iron it down. This doesn't need to be super exact, but you do have to have enough folded over so that you can sew it down later. All right, once you go ahead and iron down to the end, then you can flip up the pocket and just press it down again so it's all ready to get sewn. You need to make one more mark on the pattern. Where are you going to attach those ribbons? If you look on the pattern piece that's marked out, go ahead and open up the pocket, make a mark inside, and that is where you will attach the ribbons when you start to sew your hat. Make sure you flip everything over so you make a matching mark at the other end so there's a place to attach a ribbon at each end of the fabric. Time to start sewing. The first thing that we're going to do is close the pocket that the elastic is going to go into, and I'm just sewing along the outside edge to close that pocket. And here I tack down the corner. I realized I forgot to tack down the first corner, so go back and tack it down. Remember to do it yourself regularly. All right, now it's time to put in the elastic. Measure out a piece of elastic that is about 2.5 inches long. Attach a safety pin to it and then start to feed it into that pocket that you just sewed. Once you get it fed in, so the unsafety pinned edge is just at the very edge, go ahead and sew over that. Do one of those sew forward, sew back, sew forward, so it's really tacked on there. Then go ahead and feed that safety pin through the rest of the pocket, and once you can just pull it out the edge, take off the safety pin and then sew over the other end. And now your elastic is attached at both ends. And do that forward, backwards, forward to really attach that elastic strongly. And now you have enclosed that elastic in the pocket and you're ready for the next step. Oh, and this is my consultant. She is best known for being helpful by helping to be helpful. If you do not have elastic, you can also take a 12-inch piece of bias tape, feed it through that same pocket, and just tie it in a little slip knot, and that way it's still adjustable. So you don't have to have elastic to make it. Now it's time to get the bias tape ready to work as the ribbon pulls on your scrub cap. Trim off any ragged edges so you have nice, clean, straight edges. Then go ahead and cut 2 pieces that are about 15.5 inches long. Now comes the tricky part. You need to open up the bias tape and fold in the 2 little endy triangle corners into the center of the bias tape. fold it back over flat, and then use your sewing machine forward, back, forward to go ahead and sew off the end of the bias tape so there are no raw edges. And finally, now for the real sewing. Go ahead and open up the bottom pocket, and we're going to go ahead and sew the short ends closed so they are all sewed up and nice. Do one end, no need to tack since it's all going to be covered up. Do the other end. Now for attaching the ribbons. Find those marks that you made earlier and grab those two ribbons that you just fixed up. Find that sewn triangle end, there it is, and stick it on the outside. The square end that you haven't done anything with, put it over that mark. Go ahead, close the pocket, and then use your machine to tack it down. And again, forward, let's go, backwards, forward. So it's very securely sewn in there. And then go ahead, turn the whole thing over, stick in the other one, square end inside, and attach it securely as well. This is the part where careful sewing comes into play. Go ahead, fold that pocket back over and feel where that ribbon is. What you're going to do is sew the top of the pocket so that bias tape ribbon can slide freely in the pocket. So you have to just sort of feel for it. When you get started, tack the end, 1, 2, 3, and then go ahead and sew along the pocket carefully, making sure you do not catch that ribbon. All right, once you get to the mark where you attach the ribbon, zoom, 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 and then go ahead and do the same thing, carefully sewing over the other ribbon, tack the closure, and make sure you've got it by testing that the ribbon pulls through the pocket. Congratulations. Now it's time to attach the top and the bottom of the cap. But before we do that, there are these little thingies that need to be trimmed. Because you folded things over on an angle, there's just going to be this little bitty bit that's sticking out over the top. So go ahead and trim that off one side and then trim it off the other side. Time to pin and time to pay attention. Because the entire goal is to have no raw edges, we're going to be doing what's called a French seam. So you do what seems wrong first. Go ahead and pin wrong side to wrong side. Look how fast I can go. And when you're pinning, you may get around to the end and find that either the cap is a little longer or the side is a little longer. That's not a big deal. Just go ahead and pleat whichever one has a little too much fabric. So you can pleat over the wrap part, or if you need to, you can pleat the cap part. Either way, it's not a big deal, and the important thing is everything just sort of matches up at the end. Once everything's pinned in place, we're going to go ahead and start sewing. But instead of using a reasonable seam allowance, you're basically going to sew as close to the edges as you possibly can. So we're talking like 1/8 of an inch between the edge of the fabric and your stitch line. Again, this seems a little insane, but it'll make sense when we get to the end. So go ahead and just sort of work your way around. Make sure you pull the pins out. You don't want to break a needle. Flying metal, it's never good. Sounds bad. Just work your way around. Then when you get to the end, remember, tack it a little bit. Once you've sewn this insanely narrow seam. And you can see, I mean, it's just super narrow. There's threads hanging off. You're going to go ahead and flip it. So now you have right sides touching right sides. And this is where the magic happens. Go ahead and sort of flatten that seam between your fingers and feel where the end of the fabric ends inside this little pocket you're creating. And now you're going to go ahead and sew approximately a 1/4 inch seam. Go ahead and tack the end once again. You want to make this nice and sturdy. And then just feel with your fingers, making sure that the fabric that you sewed last time is inside this narrow little pocket that you're sewing around. This is what it looks like when you start and you get going. You've created this little pocket to contain that insanely narrow seam. So go ahead and work your way around the hat one more time. But this makes a very strong seam that has no raw edge to fray. And just get all the way to the end and then carefully tack the end forward, backwards, forward. So you have a nice strong ending. And then you can see that the French seam contains that raw edge. And then when you flip it back open, you have a very strong seam, no raw edges, and it is set to be washed a whole bunch of times and not fray. And now, except for all of the little thread trimming, which you can do in front of your favorite Netflix, you have made a cap. And then you can make a lot more caps. So this is the basic scrub cap. These are the first batch that I made. If you need instructions for making bias tape and some hints for how to batch make these scrub caps, go ahead and check out the other videos I have links to in the description. Thanks. Good luck.